The kennel next to the shed was vacant, the dog chain lying on the ground. You realized that you hadn't heard the dog when you walked into the house. Looking around for him, you approached Mother, but she didn't move. She must have been cutting courgettes to dry in the sun. A chopping board, a knife, and courgettes were pushed to the side, and small slices of courgettes were cradled in a worn bamboo basket. At first you wondered, was Mother sleeping? Recalling that she wasn't one to take naps, you peered into her face. Mother had a hand clutching her head, and she was struggling with all her might. Her lips were parted, and she was frowning so intently that her face was gnarled with deep wrinkles. Mother, she didn't open her eyes. Mother, Mother. You knelt in front of Mother and shook her hard, and her eyes opened slightly. They were bloodshot, and beads of sweat dotted her forehead. Your mother didn't seem to recognize you. Weighted with pain, her face was a miserable knot. Only some invisible marvelous could cause an expression like that. She closed her eyes again. Mother, you scrambled onto the platform and cradled your mother's tortured face on your lap. You hooked your arm around under her armpit so that her head wouldn't slide off your knees. How could she be left alone in this state? Outrage flashed through your conscience as if someone had thrown her in the shed like that, but you were the one who had moved away and left your mother's side. If one is deeply shocked, one cannot figure out what to do. Should I call an ambulance? Should I move her into the house? Where's Father? These thoughts raced through your head, but you ended up gazing down at Mother's lying across your lap. You had never seen her face contorted like that, so miserable in such pain. Her hand, which was pressing down on her forehead, fell lifelessly to the flat platform. Mother breathed laboriously, exhausted. Her limbs drooped as if she could no longer exert the effort to try to avoid the pain. Mother, your heart pounded. It occurred to you that she might be dying just like this. But then Mother's eyes opened calmly and trained themselves on you. It should have surprised her to see you, but there was nothing in her eyes. She appeared to be too weak to react. A while later, she called your name, her face dull, and she mumbled something faintly. You leaned in. When my sister died, I couldn't even cry. Mother's pale face was so hollow that you couldn't say a thing. Your aunt's funeral was in the spring. You didn't go. You hadn't even visited her, although she had been ill for almost a year. And what were you doing instead? When you were young, your aunt was your second mother. During summer holidays, you went to live with her in her house just on the other side of the mountain. Your aunt had the closest relationship with you among all your siblings. It was probably because you look like mother. Your aunt always said, you and your mother are cast from the same mold, as if she were recreating her childhood with her sister. Your aunt fed rabbits with you and braided your hair. She cooked a pot of barley with a scoop of rice on top and saved the rice for you. At night, you lay across her lap and listened to the stories she told you. You remembered how your aunt used to slide an arm around under your neck at night to fashion a pillow for you. Even though she had left this world, you still remembered your aunt's scent from those childhood visits. She spent her old age looking after her grandchildren while their parents ran a bakery. Your aunt fell down the stairs as she was carrying a child on her back and was rushed to a hospital where she found out that cancer had spread through her body to such an extent that it was too late to do anything. Your mother told you the news. My poor older sister. Why didn't they catch it until now? She'd never even gone in for a checkup. Your mother visited her sister with porridge and spooned some into her mouth. You listened quietly when your mother called to say, "Yesterday I went to see your aunt. I made sesame porridge and she had a good appetite. You were the first one mother called when she found out that your aunt had died. My sister died. You didn't say anything. You don't need to come since you're busy. Even if your mother hadn't said that, you wouldn't have been able to go to your aunt's funeral because you had a deadline coming up. Hyung-chul, who went to the funeral, told you that he had been worried that mother would be devastated, but she didn't cry. And she told him that she didn't want to go to the burial grounds. Really? You'd asked. Hyung-chul said he thought it was strange too, but he honored her wishes. In the shed that day, mother, whose face was marred with pain, told you she couldn't even cry when her sister died. Why not? You should have cried if you wanted to, you said, feeling a little relieved that she was returning to the mother you knew, even though she spoke without revealing any emotion. Your mother blinked placidly. I can't cry anymore. You didn't say anything. Because then my head hurts so much. It feels like it's going to explode. With the setting sun warming your back, you glazed down at mother's face, cradled on your lap as if it were the first time you were seeing it. Mother got headaches so severe that she couldn't even cry. Her dark eyes, which used to be as brilliant as round as the eyes of a cow that is about to give birth, were hidden under wrinkles. Her pale fat lips were dry and cracked. You picked up her arm, which she'd flung on the platform, and placed it on her stomach. You stared at the dark sunspots on the back of her head, saturated with a lifetime of labor. You could no longer say you knew mother. When your uncle was alive, he would come to see mother every Wednesday. He had just returned to Jong-up after a nomadic life of roaming the country. There was no specific reason for the visit. He just rode in on his bike and saw mother and left. Sometimes instead of coming into the house, he called from the gate, "Sister, doing well?" Then, before your mother could get out to the yard. He called, "I'm going now," and turned his bike around and left. As far as you knew, Mother and her brother were not that close. At some point before you were born, your uncle had borrowed quite a lot of money from Father, but he never paid it back. Your mother sometimes brought that up bitterly. She said because of your uncle, she always felt indebted to Father and Father's sister. Even though it was your uncle's debt, it was hard for your mother to come to terms with the knowledge that he didn't pay back. When 4 or 5 years went by without news from your uncle, your mother often wondered out loud, what could your uncle be doing these days? You couldn't tell if Mother was worrying about him or resenting him. One day your mother heard someone push the gate open and enter, saying, "Sister, are you in?" Mother, who was inside eating tangerines with you, threw open the door and ran out. It happened so quickly. Who was it that got her so excited? Curious, you followed her out. Mother paused on the porch, looking at the gate, shouted, "Brother!" to the person standing next to it, and ran to him, not caring that she was barefoot. It was your uncle. Your mother, who had run out like the wind, beat his chest with her fist and cried, "Brother, brother!" You watched her from the porch. It was the first time you had heard her call someone brother. When she referred to her brother, she always called him your uncle. You don't understand why you were so surprised when you saw Mother run to your uncle and call him brother in a delighted nasal tone, when you had known all along that you had an uncle. You realized, oh, Mother has a brother too. Sometimes you laughed to yourself when you remembered what your mother was like that day, your aging mother jumping down from the porch and running across the yard to your uncle, shouting brother as if she were a child. Mother acting like a girl, even younger than you. That mother was stuck in your head. It made you think, even Mother. You don't understand why it took you so long to realize something so obvious. To you, Mother was always Mother. It never occurred to you that she had once taken her first step or had once been 3 or 12 or 20 years old. Mother was Mother. She was born as Mother until you saw her running to your uncle like that. It hadn't dawned on you that she was a human being who harbored the exact same feeling you had for your own brothers, and this realization led to the awareness that she too had had a childhood. From then on, you sometimes thought of a mother as a child, as a girl, as a young woman, as a newlywed, as a mother who had just given birth to you. You couldn't leave Mother and return to the city after seeing her like that in the shed. Father was in Sokcho with some people from the Regional Center for Korean Traditional Performing Arts. He was supposed to be home in 2 days. Although Mother got over the severe pain, she couldn't free herself from the headache, and she couldn't smile, let alone cry. She couldn't even understand your suggestion that she should go to hospital. When you helped her into the house, she walked gingerly, trying to keep her pain in check. A long time passed before she could talk. Mother said that she always got headaches, but only had terrible ones once in a while, and that she should put up with it since those moments passed. Did your siblings know about mother's headaches? Did father? You wanted to tell them and to take her to a big hospital as soon as you returned to the city. When she was able to move around by herself, mother asked, "Don't you need to go back?" At some point, your visits home had become shorter. You'd come for only a few hours and return to the city. You thought of your date the next day, but told your mother that you were going to stay the night. You remember the smile that spread across her face. You left the live octopus you'd bought at the Pohang fish market in the kitchen, since neither you nor your mother knew what to do with it, and you sat across from mother at the table like old times, quietly eating a simple meal of rice and banchan, side dishes of water kimchi, braised tofu, sauteed anchovies, and toasted seaweed. When mother wrapped a piece of seaweed around some rice, as she did when you were little, and held it out, you took it and ate it. After dinner, to digest the food, you and mother walked around the outside of the house. It was no longer the same house you grew up in, but the front, side, and backyard were still connected like before. In the backyard on the ledge, there were still so many tall clay jars. When you were young, they were filled with soy sauce, red pepper paste, salt and bean paste, but now they were empty. As the two of you walked, mother sometimes leading and sometimes falling behind, she suddenly asked you why would you'd come home. "I went to Pohang." "Pohang is far from here." "Yes, it's farther to come here from Pohang than from Seoul." "Yes, it is." "What made you come here from Pohang when it seems like you don't ever have time to visit?" Instead of answering, you grabbed mom's hand desperately, as if you were grasping for a lifeline in the darkness, because you didn't know how to explain your emotions. You told mother that in the early morning you had gone to lecture at a Braille library in Pohang. "A Braille library?" mother asked. "Braille is what the blind read with their fingers." Mother nodded. As you circled the house, you told mother about your trip to Pohang. For a few years, the Braille Library had been asking you to visit, but each time you couldn't because of previous engagement. In early spring, you'd received another call. You had just published your latest work. The librarian told you that they wanted to publish your newest book in Braille. Braille, you didn't know much about it except that it was the language of the blind, as you told mother. You listened to the librarian impassively, as if you were hearing about a book you hadn't yet read. The librarian said they wanted your permission. If the librarian hadn't said permission, you might not have agreed to go to the Braille Library. that word permission moved you. Blind people wanted to read your book. They were asking for your permission to recreate your book in a language only they could communicate through. You answered sure, suddenly feeling powerless. The librarian said that the book would be completed by November and the Braille Day was also in November. He said they would appreciate it if you could come that day and participate in the dedication ceremony for the book. You wondered how things had got to that point, but you couldn't go back on your sure. It probably helped that it was early spring and November seemed far away, but time passed, spring passed, summer came and went, autumn came, and soon enough it was November. And then that day had arrived. Most things in the world are now unexpected if one thinks carefully about them. Even something one would call unusual, if one thinks about it, it's really just the thing that was supposed to happen. Encountering unusual events often means you didn't think things through. Your trips to the Braille Library and the events that occurred there were all things you could have predicted if you'd really thought about the Braille Library. But you were busy in the spring, summer, and autumn. Even on the day you went to the Braille Library, you weren't thinking about the people you were going to meet there. You were worried about you would be late for the 10 o'clock meeting time. You barely made it onto the 8 a.m. flight, then arrived in Pohang, took a cab to the Braille Library, and went to the waiting room. The director sat down facing you with the help of a volunteer. He greeted you politely. Thank you for coming all this way, and held his hand out, trying to mask your nervousness. You shook it, saying brightly, hello. His hand was soft. The director talked about your book until right before the event. You smiled and nodded at this blind man who had read your work, even though he couldn't see you smile or nod. That day was Braille Day, their holiday. When you entered the auditorium, 400 people awaited you, some still trickling in with the help of volunteers. There were men and women of all ages, but no children. The ceremony began, and a few people came to the front one by one and made little speeches. Some people received certificates of appreciation. They spoke about your book, and you went to the front to receive the Braille version. Your one book became 4 volumes in Braille. The books given to you by the director were twice as big as yours, but they were light. You heard applause as you returned to your seat with the books in your hands. The ceremony continued. As plaques were given to congratulate readers, you opened one of the volumes. At once you felt faint. An infinite number of dots on white paper. It was as if you had fallen into a black hole, as if you were walking on stairs you knew so well that climbing them even didn't register in your mind. And while thinking about something else, you missed a step and tumbled down. Braille proliferated on the white paper, each letter a hole made by a needle, words you couldn't decipher at all. You told Mother that you'd flipped past the first page and the second page and the third page, and then close the book because your mother was listening intently to your story. You continued. At the end of the ceremony, you stood in front of everyone and talked about your work. When you laid the books on the dais and looked out at the audience, your back stiffened. You had no idea what to focus on, standing in front of 400 people who couldn't see. So, what did you do? Your mother asked. You told her that the 50 minutes given to you seemed never ending. You were the type of person who looked into someone's eyes when you talked. When you talked, you sometimes told the entire story or maybe even only half, depending on the feeling you got from the person's eyes. Some eyes coaxed out stories you'd never told anyone. You wondered, does mother know that I'm like that? In front of 400 blind people, you didn't know who to look at or how to start talking. Some eyes were closed, some half open, and some hidden behind dark glasses. Some eyes seemed to stare straight through you and your nervousness. Even though all eyes were aimed at you, you became silent in front of eyes that couldn't see you. You wondered what would be the point of talking about your book in front of these unseeing eyes, but it wasn't appropriate to talk about something else, such as anecdotes from your life. If anything, they should be telling you their life stories because you felt stuck. The first thing you said into the mic was, what should I talk about? They all burst out laughing. Did they laugh because they thought you meant you could tell any story, or to make you feel more comfortable? A man in his mid 40s replied, didn't you come to talk about your work? The man's eyes were pointed at you but were closed. Focusing on them, you started to talk about the inspiration behind the book, the things you experienced emotionally during its writing, and the hopes you had for the book after you were done. You were surprised of all the people you'd met that listened to your words the most intently. They demonstrated with their bodies that they were listening carefully. One person was nodding, and other pushed one foot forward, and someone else was leaning into the person in front of him. Even though you couldn't understand a word of their writing system, they had read your book and asked questions and shared their thoughts. You told mother that they revealed such positive feelings about that book, more than anyone else you had encountered. Mother, who was listening quietly, said, still, even they've read your book. A short silence flowed between you and mother. Mother asked you to go on. You continued. When you stopped talking, one person raised his hand and asked if he could ask a question. You told him to go ahead. Even though he's blind, he said traveling was his hobby. Mother, you were stunned. Where would a blind person travel? He said he'd read sometimes. You had written a long time ago that was based in Peru. The character in the novel went to Machu, Machu Picchu, and there was a scene where a train went backwards. He said after he read that he wanted to ride that train in Peru. He asked if you had personally ridden the train. It was a work you had written over 10 years ago. You had such a bad memory that you often opened the refrigerator door and forgot what you had opened it and would stand there for a while with the chill of the fridge washing over you until you gave up and shut the door, started to talk about Peru, where you had traveled before you wrote that book. Peru, where you had traveled before you wrote that book. Lima, Cusco, dubbed the belly button of the universe, San Pedro Station, where you took the train to Machu Picchu at dawn, about the train that started forward and jerked back time many times before starting off to Machu Picchu. You told mother the names of the places and mountains that I'd forgotten about, poured out, feeling friendship from eyes that had never seen, eyes that seemed to understand and accept any flow of yours. You said something you had never said about that book. Mother asked, "What is it?"